Hey everyone, I'm Victor Dwyer, and this is the Mind Workshop podcast, where we get founders and experts and we just talk about happiness and what it takes to really have a happiness perspective. Today we have Ryan from True Earth on, and I'm really excited to get him on and just talk about it. Ryan, please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're currently working on.
Cool. Hey, everybody. Thanks a lot for having me on the show, first of all. But yeah, I'm Ryan Mckenzie. I'm one of the co-founders of a brand called True Earth. We make laundry detergent strips to replace like liquid laundry detergent. Founded it just over 4 years ago, and we had a uh, pretty crazy growth trajectory in the first year, like hitting like eight-figure run rate within a matter of months. And yeah, we're still here four plus years later, really trying to blow the brand up even more and get make more impact in more retail locations, continue to sell direct to consumer, and just try to leave a lasting imprint in kind of like a world that's dominated right now in the entrepreneurial space by capitalism, and still be a capitalist, but also do it in a way that's ethical and creates value and helps people and the planet.
Yeah, for sure. And what has been your way to really find like when it comes to finding your journey, what has been your way to kind of really find happiness lately?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, and we were talking about this earlier, like I think that people are too over the top in the pursuit of happiness, and I think that happiness is kind of like this end result that people expect to eventually get to in their life. And happiness is like, I mean, your emotions are a spectrum, right? Like you can't always be elated. If you're always elated, you're not happy anymore. You're just baseline. And
Yeah.
um, being happy is awesome. It's fun when you're feeling that way. But it's like, if you're on, everybody wants to go sit back, kick back and relax on the beach and have cocktails on vacation. And that's cool for 7 days. But after you've been there for a month drinking on the beach, you're no longer on vacation. You're just a degenerate. And,
Yeah.
so you want to get these elated states. But I think for me, the pursuit of happiness is actually the pursuit of peace because I'm not overwhelmed. I'm not thinking about things that are causing me grief. I'm able to process information in a logical way that doesn't emotionally drag me down. And that's kind of what I'm after at the end of the day.
Yeah, I always talk about how the only people that can be happy 100% of the time are psychopaths. Literally, that's the only people that can be happy because all emotions have ups and downs. So if you're happy for a long time, you're going to have that like negative cycle. It's completely normal to go through that. And what I kind of, to your point about happiness being peace, it's really getting as many of those negative emotions out of your life, telling you that you suck, that you're not enough, and everything else that keeps you in a constant state of negativity and hating who you are. And once you really tackle those insecurities head on and realize that they're there, first of all, number one, and then second of all, dealing with them and saying, hey, like, how can we be on the same team? Then you're really in a state where you can be in a positive place in your life where you can be happy and because some people are guilty because of their happiness,
Yeah.
and there's so many different voices that counter, and especially in the world we live in today where like you always have to have the next thing in order to be in, in order to be special, you got to always have the next thing. You always got to be like higher up status and everything else, and that we think, oh, once we accomplish that, we'll be happy. But that's just not the case. Like, it really is just tackling those voices inside our head and saying, hey, like, tackle those insecurities first, and then you'll be in a much more positive state of mind. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think like I don't think that you'll ever get rid of those thoughts. Like, I'll be driving and I'll see the new version of my vehicle and I'm like, oh, that would should be nice to get like the new version of this vehicle or whatever. And then it doesn't matter how many times I tell myself that I don't need that vehicle. Those thoughts are still going to pop up. Like it's just
Hmm.
the human condition. I think what the difference is being able to be self-aware enough to recognize that, okay, I let myself have this thought for a second, but and it's not bad that I thought this thing, but I
Yeah.
don't need it. And I recognize that this thought is part of the human condition of wanting more needing more, and that was probably at some point like a survival mechanism, that like what you had was never enough, right? Like accumulation of resources or status or whatever, right? Like
Hmm.
we're not in that world anymore. But I think nonetheless, like there, no matter how stoic you are or like how much meditation you do, it's I think it's more about how you react to those thoughts versus completely trying to shut them down, because it's kind of like not dealing with the problem. Like if you continue to sweep it under the rug, it's eventually gonna like emerge as this gigantic beast.
Yeah. And that brings me, that's a great point, actually. There's a difference between repressing an insecurity and countering it. Um, and when you think of like repressing an insecurity, for example, I have an insecurity of, I have a voice in my head that constantly tells me I'm fat. No matter how skinny I get, I have an insecurity saying, you're fat, you're fat, you're fat, you got to get skinnier. And so no
I
matter
got that
how
one. I got
skinny,
that one too. Believe it or not, I do too.
so, and because I was like, I got really fit, I was like, what is going on? Like, no matter how fit or strong I get, no, I'm always telling myself I'm fat. And so, um, that's one of the insecurities I have. And the way I count, rather than like repressing the insecurity of that voice telling me I'm fat and just saying, shut up, be quiet, I countered it by saying, no, I am good enough. Like, I do love myself for who I am, because that's what the core of where that voice comes from. It's the voice of not being enough and not being comfortable in my own skin. So I had to tell myself, I do love myself for who I am. And then that insecurity that's always telling me that I'm fat was able to be countered from that. And so that way, it really, like, if you tackle the insecurity at the core, that's where it starts to solve itself. But you don't want to repress that insecurity, because that's where it really, really, where it gets out of your conscious awareness, where it messes you up and you don't realize it's there.
Yeah, it like pops back in like in the least opportune moment, right? Like
Yeah.
you meet like your dream spouse or significant other like on the beach, and you happen to be not wearing a shirt, and it's all of a sudden it's like, hello, you had a cheeseburger for breakfast. You this person is going to reject you, and like like it's not the case. It's just like it's like it sneaks out and says and catches you when you're not looking for it.
Yeah, 100%. And I'd love to hear from you. Are there any cases that you'd be willing to share about any insecurities that you've had in the past or have now, and how you've been possibly been able to counter them, or deal with them, or kind of go through them within your journey of happiness?
Yeah, I mean, when I was like, I think like probably like 22 to like 25, I had a lot of different bouts with depression, and like back then, I was working in business intelligence, and I had a business, and every free second that I wasn't working, I was either exercising or I was prepping food, and I actually think I developed an eating disorder. I think I pretty much did. I actually have never really publicly talked about this, but I developed like a bit of an eating disorder where I would eat completely flawlessly, like 5 days of the week, and then I would just like go off the rails, eating like 6,000 calories or some crazy amount of food a couple times a week, and at the same because I was kind of like getting some having bouts of depression at the time. Like I was a very imbalanced human being, and I thought that my value was in the way that I physically looked. Like I know it's totally irrational to me right now. Like, but like I thought that that was what was important, and excuse me. And like, man, I did look like looking back, and I had lots of times where I didn't think I looked good, and I'm like, now I'm like, man, I would take any spectrum of that body in my current day. But like, I always thought that there was something else that I needed in my life in order to be happy. And I actually, during this phase, like I can remember I moved to downtown Vancouver. I live in the suburbs now, but and I was like super depressed, and I went for a walk, and it was like crazy full moon, and I was right on the beach, and there's these huge waves being pulled in because the moon was nuts and the clouds were all crazy. And I was listening to this song. I was like, I think it was by a band named Powderfinger. It was like the song was My Happiness on like an old school iPod.
Uh-huh.
And dude, I had like this moment where I had this big shift in the way that I kind of like looked at the world and things. And at the time, I thought that the solution was like experiences, which I think experiences are great, but I think I was still looking for like a patch, but it was a step towards, step away from all these things that I thought were important, not actually being as important as I thought they were. And
Mhm.
I came out of it and I went and I started doing like trying more new things and putting myself out there a bit more. Not that I was introverted or anything at the time, but like I went bungee jumping and what else did I do? I did something else, but like I just kind of felt like I was like changing my life up. And it, even though that I don't think that that was what actually solved the issues that I had going on in my head, it was a moment where I felt there was a huge transition where I was making progress. And I just wish that, like, obviously I can't tell myself in the past, like, how to think, but like the way that you feel, and like, it doesn't like come from things externally. It's not cars, it's not houses, it's not
Mhm.
experiences, it's not who likes you, who's your friend, or, it's about like it's about just at the end of the day what I talked about earlier. It's like being okay, being okay inside your head, being able to process the information, and being able to the biggest thing is like being able to identify when you're telling yourself false narratives that are leading you down like negative mental health paths. And I'll just leave one more note to this. Like I still get those days. Like I still get days where I feel sad, or I feel depressed, or I don't feel like I have value, or whatever it is. And I think everybody gets that. But like now, after about an hour of kind of like sitting in it, I recognize I'm like, oh, this is one of those days. I'm going to stop trying to do whatever it is that I'm trying to do here. And I'm just going to go for a walk for like an
Yeah.
hour and I grab a coffee or something.
And
And I'm
that's
just going to keep
great.
walking until I feel better, you know?
And it's so important because you justified your emotions because like you're at a point where you said, "Hey, like I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling pain," and you said, "Hey, like these are the emotions I'm feeling." But as we grow up, we're conditioned not to feel not to um, attempt to feel those feelings. Like for example, when a teacher comes by and says, "Oh, don't cry, big boys don't cry," type of thing, we've learned to shame that feeling of sadness and feeling of crying. Especially being a male, we especially know that it's very shameful to cry in front of other males or things like that, and it makes it where it's difficult. But we do have to justify our emotions, saying, "Hey, I'm feeling sad right now. Hey, I want to cry right now." And that's just okay. Like it really is. It's not this crazy thing that, but we've been conditioned even when we're little to saying, "Hey, it's you have to feel shame in order if you cry." No, like it's okay to be sad. It's okay to feel pain. And that feeling of allowing yourself to feel those emotions feels so amazing. As soon as I started justifying my emotions and saying it's okay to cry, it's okay to feel pain, like I just felt like a burden come. Like I felt like so much better after that. It was
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. I think too, like even like communicating with somebody when you're feeling a certain way, I think like the default response for people who aren't really aware of what's happening is like accusatory type behavior. Like, oh, you did this to me, you did this, you need to stop doing this. Where like, and then you're automatically putting the other person in like a defensive state. And instead, like you say, like if somebody did something that might not be making you happy, you say like, listen, I'm personally feeling sad or upset or belittled when sometimes you say things like this. I know you're probably not trying to do that, but that's
Mhm.
how I feel. And then if that person tells you that you're crazy, or they're minimizing your emotions, that person's an asshole, because it's not about them
Yeah.
and their behavior, it's about how you feel. And like emotions aren't always logical, but that person if they care about you, they should like, I know this is kind of getting off the rails here, but like I think that a lot of people would have happier relationships if they shared about how something impacted them versus or how something impacts their emotions versus how the thing that somebody else did was
Mm.
shitty, you know?
Yeah. That, like, I think that goes into like describing yourself in the emotional realm, really, like saying, "Hey, like, hey, I can't believe you did something mean to me." But then saying, rather than saying that, saying, "Hey, like, that hurt me. That hurt what you did. Like, it made me feel sad. It made me feel um pain that you would cause me pain like that." And I think that's a lot better way to do it. So now they understand your context of how you're feeling emotionally rather than saying, "Hey, you suck," type of thing.
Yeah.
It's more
Yeah.
like, "Hey, you caused me pain." And now you're having a real conversation about, and they have a lot of context of how you feel. And that just makes it where whatever relationship or person you're talking to, it becomes a more open gateway of emotions, it seems like.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's my. You know, again, I say these things like it's easy for me to sit here and say this when I'm logical. It doesn't always come out of my mouth that way when,
Yeah,
you know.
because we're human. Like
Yeah,
at the end of the day, like we can't be flawless at every single thing, but it's important to realize those are there. But I do want to touch on um like about how we work so hard to silence these insecurities inside of us. And like you and I especially, like I think all the really big time entrepreneurs have all these traits in common, is that we work so hard um on these things. And I think what the difference is between big time entrepreneurs is we are able to handle our insecurities differently than others. While some people might get really sad by their depression, other people might handle the insecurity by working like 100% of the day and to silence that depression or silence those insecurities that you have. And so that way you just work, and then that's the way they handle these insecurities. That's how they react to them. And that's where it's like really important to take a step back and saying, "Hey, why am I working 14, 18 hours a day? Like, what's the point?" Because especially in America, we're all like conditioned. We got to work hard. You got to be successful. You got to
yeah,
work. You got to have that nice house. And instead, you can take a step back and say, like, why? Why do I need a nice house? Why do I need that nice car? Why does that matter? Because at its core, it doesn't. It matters to other people, but it shouldn't matter to you, especially when it comes
yeah.
down to dealing with your insecurities. It's so important.
I think a lot of people chase these these dreams, like the house, the car, whatever, because they feel that's going to fill the void, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I think there's a really interesting thing that I noticed over the course of my life that is that like when you're like 18 years old, you have you're short on money and you're large on time. You have as much time to do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah.
So you're like, okay, well, I'm going to start working, so or go to school or whatever, so that I can I have money, so that I can hop on the hedonic treadmill. Not thinking that, but like start
Mhm.
buying things that like fill my dreams, become a big person, right? And then you slowly like for people that are ambitious, they slowly their goals slowly grow, and it requires more and more of their time. And eventually, you get to this point where you have no time, and all you want, like you're willing to give up tons of money just to get time again. And you realize, which is super ironic, when you're say 40 years old, that you were actually the most wealthy when you were 18, because the things that make most people happy are, a place to live, uh, exercise, like time being social with their friends, and the cost of all of those things is pretty darn small,
Yeah.
and it's crazy. I mean, it took me a long time to get there and figure that out too. But like, it's crazy how people wind up burning away majority of their good years because they're told that, hey, hustle in your 20s, and when you can relax in your 50s. Well, fuck, who cares, man? Enjoy the time when you have a young body that can do all the fun things,
Yeah.
and then work your ass off later. Anyways.
Yeah. And I totally agree with that. And I had a personal like thing about myself where I really became more enlightened. is I spent my whole life talking to my future self, saying like, hey, these are the things I'm working on. Like I've always wanted to become my future self. That I would have always wanted to become that person. But then I realized that my future self would trade every accomplishment, every single dollar, every single thing that he's worked on to become who I am right now. Like to where I can go see my parents and I can go see my sister where she's at right now, because right where my future self is at, he's not going to be able to see those things. He's not going to have the time or young body or anything else like that to be able to do that thing. And he would trade every single dollar, every single accomplishment in order to be me right now. And once I realized that, I was like, holy crap, like, why am I working so hard? Why am I working 14 hours a day to always be super accomplished? I'm doing this all for my future self, but if my future self is goal to only be where I'm at right now, my I should just be living. Like that's where I
Yeah.
should be at. Like that was a huge enlightening point for me, is because I was always trying to help my future self become better. But if all he cares about is me living right now, because if right now is going to be the best moment I'm going to be living, I need to live. Like I just need to relax and where I'm at and not always worry about working every single second. Like I just need to live with who I am.
Yeah. It's about be like being present and like yeah, enjoying. I don't know. I 100% agree with you. It's just like but it's kind of like, it's. I don't think as much as somebody can tell you that, it's like one of those things that like it's like me trying to tell my kid how to he plays lacrosse and hockey, and like trying to tell him, and soccer, and like trying to be like, hey, when you're on defense, just like push the guy to the side, and he's like, no, dad. And I'm like, he's like, no. I'm like, okay, well, that wasn't very good coaching, but until he will figure it out on his own, and it's like or he'll listen to somebody else maybe. But I think like for most of these lessons, it's like you have to kind of go through them. You can't they can't you can't watch a
Yep.
Alex Hormozy video on YouTube and like and just know.
And that's where I really try to make like a lot of this actionable in my content, is because it's one thing to say, hey, have a positive mindset and just don't have negative thoughts. That's cool. But then you can actually take that a step further and say, okay, like go inside your room right now and think about what are some negative thoughts that you're thinking about yourself. Okay, cool, I'm fat. Okay, like those are some of the negative thoughts I have. And like that awareness that you just unlocked by realizing that these voices are there, you're like, holy crap, like you could have a voice that was in your head, like horrible negative voice in your head, you just didn't realize it was there. And until you realize you can separate yourself from these thoughts that you have, you open up a whole gateway of opportunities for yourself to change them and just to be more aware of them. And that's what a lot of the content I try to talk about is to say, hey, these thoughts aren't yours. These are just thoughts that are coming in. You have complete control by the content you watch. The content that you consume strengthens what voice ends up being the one that wins. For example,
Yeah.
if you are watching the news and how much the world sucks, the voice in your head is going to tell you how much you suck and how much the world sucks. That is like end of story. But if you watch a lot of content that promotes, hey, the world isn't a good place, that the world is better and there are good people out there, now you're going to start believing about yourself that I am a good person, that I can do good things. And that will change your self image in the voice that ends up winning. But you decide which content you consume, which decides which voices end up winning. So it's all about what you decide.
Yeah, I think I might be having a connection issue here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. I just had a warning; it just went away. Yeah, I think there's this book by oh, it's gonna oh, I can't even think of it. I have to look it up on my phone, but I'll tell you what it's called in a second. But it's about it's basically it's called Never Binge Again by what's his name? Never Binge Again by Glenn Livingston, and it's a pretty similar topic to that. It's a really good book. It actually helped me eat much better for a brief period of time, but because of the binging eating disorder that I kind of built up myself when I was in the fitness phase of my life. But he basically calls the voice in his head that tells him to eat like the piggy, And like whenever the piggy talks, he's like, "Shut up, piggy," and he's a psychologist. But he's like, "You put the piggy in a cage." Actually, it's funny. I made a piggy joke on Facebook, commenting on something that he posted, and I got a 24-hour Facebook ban because it said I was being a bully. But it's funny because
Aw.
it's his book. um, but it was an automatic thing. Anyways, it's a fantastic book. But it's like the whole idea is like externalizing it, right? And like when you notice, like when people binge eat, like when they start eating something and it triggers them to like go on this huge binge eating fast, and kind of like what you were just saying, like the things that you need to identify what triggers you and avoid what those triggers are. So like if I eat like a 5-cent candy from the gas station, 10 minutes later my brain's gonna be like, yo, or my piggy's gonna be like, yo dude, we should go get a pint of Ben and Jerry's. We'll crush the whole thing, like it'll be fantastic, right? And it's like, shut up piggy, get back in your cage. But what's interesting about all this, like one of the analogies he says is like, if you eat something or you do something that triggers you, it's kind of like, it's not like if you relate it to like a car. If you're driving a car and you blow a tire, when you notice that your tire is blown, unless you're like getting chased by the police, you're gonna stop. You're either gonna change the flat tire or you're going to call somebody to help come fix it for you, right? It's like, so like why then when you notice that you're eating some food that's going to lead to binge eating, like why when you eat something bad do you need to go, like it's like you wouldn't drive around with that flat tire all day. So when you notice that you're having this problem with how you're behaving, why wouldn't you stop and just stop that behavior then, instead of just like driving around with a flat tire? Like, it's a super interesting book, but it's short. I think it's like, I don't even know, like I think it's three it's 11 hours. Never mind, it's not short, but it's worth reading if if you want to externalize the internal piggy. And
Yeah, I have a really bad binge eating disorder when it comes down to um so I country dance a lot. So meaning that like basically I go from like I intermittent fast, I only eat one meal a day, and I'm
yeah,
pretty good about controlling that one meal. And then the problem is when I do nothing. So Sundays I don't do anything. Sundays are my rest days, and I'll eat probably 6,000, 5,000 to 6,000 calories because once I eat, it's like my brain's go like when you're constantly distracted, it's easy to not eat. It's like
yeah,
natural. But once your brain is like used to not just like doing nothing, it's just like, oh my gosh, I got to go eat. I got to go eat. And then you like the more you like eat, you have to really like it strengthens that voice every time you binge eat type of thing. So it's where you have to really offset it, realize that that voice is there to not binge eat, so that way you can kind of counter that. Because oh man, especially if you're constantly trying to go on a calorie deficit,
yeah,
you're going to know what it's like to binge eat, because all it takes is one piece of candy, one piece of really good sugar. For me, it's like really good peanut butter.
oh,
But
peanut butter,
yeah,
yeah,
like I love peanut butter. I could go through a whole jar of peanut butter if you really wanted me to. But yeah, it's so hard not to binge eat. But you have to realize that those are voices, and you can counter those voices. But you have to first realize that they're there.
yeah, yeah, and like also want them to shut up. Like
Yeah.
when you, like sometimes they're just like, all right, you can come to the party. Let's do this. Let's go get that. But like,
Yeah.
yeah. But I think we probably have a very similar uh, psychological passenger that is
Yeah.
feeding us
And
negative.
I feel like most entrepreneurs have the same. I feel like most people in America have the same insecurities because we're kind of conditioned to have those same insecurities. Like we all want that perfect body. Like think about it. Like think about the media, social media that we have. Like you got to have that perfect body. You got to have that nice house, that nice car, the nice like partner. Like everything's got to be perfect. And that's kind of how like all our brains are conditioned. And when we fall less than that, we get negative voices like, "Oh, you didn't get that. Oh, you're crying. Oh, what a baby," type of thing. And that's where you have those negative voices come from. And then once you actually accomplish something, that people are like, "Oh my gosh, you're so rich. Oh my gosh, you're so amazing." So it's like this constant thing that we feel like it's more important to have that nice car than it actually is to than our traits that we have. Like we think it's better. It's that our the things that we have are more important than our identity itself, which is
Yeah.
crazy. I recently made a post about how females don't love you for who you are. Females don't love you for who you are if they only love the things that you have. And that was the post. And guys like completely disagreed. They were like, no, like you are nothing as a guy if you don't have anything. And I was like, people really think
Utility,
about this. Like people,
utility.
yeah, like people don't a girl won't love you if you don't have anything. And it's like, no, like the girl loves the traits that you have. And those if you don't have the traits associated with that, they need to like love you and the traits that you have, not the things that you have, because that isn't true love if they don't have it, and that's like super important. I just find that crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is also like, uh, I think that's the type of person that you want to be with. I do think that there's also people that I think like stereotypically, I think a lot of women are valued for the, and this is like not, I'm not saying my belief, but I think there's stereotypically a lot of people feel that women are loved for what they appear or with their appearance, and I think stereotypically men are loved for the utility that they can provide,
Yeah,
and like it's I don't, I'm not saying that that's like absolute, but I think those are like I think that it does exist. I think it probably gets painted as absolute, but I think that there's lots of people that um, are like mentally mature enough or have a high enough emotional intelligence that they aren't necessarily chasing those things. Like, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I, safety and is the first piece of the bottom of the pyramid, and I think that that's been mistakenly mistakenly had like you have ridiculous amount of money as being what's considered stable, probably labeled by men, not by women. But I think that from like a spouse or mate perspective, I think women are more so looking for somebody who is stable, and whether that's mentally stable because they, genetically they want to build a family with somebody who is going to be able to not financially provide for them, but be able to provide that bottom, be a part of the equation of the bottom layer of the pyramid. And I think it's just kind of gotten exasperated to where it's like you need to have $1 billion.
yeah. Yes, because it like at the end of the day, it's like it really is just like a negative, a never-ending cycle. Like no matter how much you accomplish, no matter how much you get, and a lot of these entrepreneurs get so burnt out. Like especially the entrepreneurs that we know that where they're like huge entrepreneurs because their insecurities push them past a limit, saying I gotta be bigger, I gotta get the company bigger, I gotta scale, and they're in a constant state of constant chasing, and they eventually get burnt out. Like it's an inevitable cycle, and they keep doing it over and over and over. They say, oh yeah, this time I'm going to do this, and it makes it, yes, your company's able to scale, but you're still going to always be finding the next thing to get burnt out on, the next thing to chase, because you're running away from those inner insecurities that you have. So
Yeah.
you have to really back up and ask why. Why am I working so hard? Why am I doing these things? Because most likely there's some insecurities in there that's telling you that you're not good enough, that you have to be better. And that's the reason what you're running away from rather than running towards something.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's true. I mean, I don't think I know too many entrepreneurs that are like perfectly balanced individuals either. And I
Yeah.
don't necessarily think that like, one of the posts that always drives me nuts is like, first of all, I never graduated from college. I quit. I dropped out. It was an accident, but I did. But I never say like college is stupid or university is stupid. Um,
Mhm.
there's like there's like this culture that you need to essentially like hustle and kill yourself to, and the only thing valuable is being an entrepreneur, and like, oh, if you want to work a job, you're dumb. Like, well, that's,
Hmm.
you're dumb for saying that, because like not everybody wants what you want. Maybe they're actually smarter than you. Maybe they have the resources that they need to be happy. Maybe they don't need to fill that particular void. And not everybody not everybody needs the things that you need to be in a place where they're content. And it drives me nuts because it's polarizing. I know when people post that, but I'm like, come on, man, you don't represent everybody.
Yeah. And like what the main person what a person's like primary version of success is will tell you so much about them, because when most people think of success, they think of the nice car, they think of the big house, they think of a lot of money. And when you think that way, that you think that, oh, that's the goal I want to be in, that's the person I want to be. But my version of success is literally like a guy that makes 50,000, $40,000 a year and loving his life. Like that is like my version of success. Like no matter how much money you make, because you and I probably know a lot of people, millionaires that are miserable and hate
Yep.
their lives, and a lot of people don't have the luxury of knowing all these millionaires and realizing no, they're not happy. They really hate their lives most of the time, and that's where you have to take a step back and say, hey, if someone is making practically no money, or even a homeless person on the side of the road making no money, but if he loves his life, awesome. Like that's what who I would define as a successful person. They accomplished life. They are happy in their own skin. Like they accomplished it. They beat life at that point. But the person that's making
Yeah,
millions
yeah,
and hating who they are, that is not my version of success.
totally. I actually like a few months ago. I actually like decided to like come up with like three core values for like just that drive my life, and so that the things that I do, and this sounds like I'm like systemizing my life like an entrepreneur, but I decided that like everything I do needs to lead to me being autonomous. So
Mhm.
like in the event that I stop working on this business or I stop doing something else, like my pursuit of resources is any pursuit of resources is to uh, have enough that I don't nobody can tell me where or what I need to be doing. So there's autonomy, and then there's simplicity. Anything that I add to my life, because life is my life's already freaking zoo. I got three kids, and business, right? It needs to be simple. It needs to like I can figure out one problem at a time, but anything that's going to be part of my life needs to be easy for me to handle, easy for me to do, easy for me to execute on. And then the third thing is like the diversity of tasks, which essentially is like me getting to solve new problems, me getting to new fun things, learn new skills, try new things. And once I like kind of like identified what it is I wanted out of my life, like none of those things you don't see like car, house, like there is resources in there, but it's in the pursuit of financial freedom, not the pursuit of a Lamborghini. It's a pursuit of if I stop working, can I pay my mortgage for the next 2 years without having to worry about it? Or can I have enough resources that I can live off the dividends or interest for the rest of my life and I can spend all of my time doing what I want with who I want? That's kind of how I've personally defined and kind of I think where I found again, I'm sure there's holes in it. I'm sure it's not perfect, but for me right now, it's like allowing me to work within a structure that gives me the things that I need to feel like I'm not patching insecurities. I'm not like chasing things I don't want. It's just everything I add to my life now has a purpose towards this life that I want to live.
Yeah. And I think it's really important. I think a good caveat is saying like, hey, like it's still important to have goals.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, I'm not saying it's important to not have goals. It's more of the fact that asking why behind those goals. Because most of us, like especially us entrepreneurs, are saying, hey, yes, we got to have that big business. We got to be successful. But we don't ask ourselves why. Like we're saying, oh, I just need to get that million. I need to get to that $1 million per year run rate. It's like, but why? You have enough money to live. Like, and then it goes, oh, because I need that nice car. Oh, I need that nice house. It's like, but why? It's like, oh, because I'm not comfortable in my own skin, or all these other things. And it's really important to take a step back and ask why behind your goals, because once you do, you know that you are the person that created those goals rather than society creating those goals for you. Most of us are all running on default mode where society creates all our goals to have everything nice, to be perfect in every single way. But we didn't set those goals. Society did. And when you ask why, you separate yourself from what society says and you ask, okay, where do these goals apply to me? And that's what makes it where you're in control of your life and where you're in control of where you're going. And I guarantee if you are the one setting your goals, you're not gonna kill yourself, or you're not going to work yourself into the ground to get to those goals. You're gonna say, okay, I am motivated toward these goals because I know they're mine. I'm gonna work hard, and you're not gonna grind. Like you're not gonna grind 18 hours a day to get to them. Okay, I'll get to them when I can. Like I know
Yeah.
I want to work toward them, and you're not going to like beat yourself into the ground for not doing it.
Yeah, totally. Like, and you can just, the easiest thing to do when you have goals, and if you want to be, I don't want to say balanced human being, but is just like identify the night before. Like, if you want to avoid being overwhelmed, just like, write down two things that you want to get done the next day that are like high payoff activities. Like, uh, Parkinson's law is a legitimate thing. Like, a task will occupy as much time as you give it. So when you have one or two things that you have to get done that day, and you have other things that are scheduled in, you power through it, and it's crazy. Like, when you look at it as a marathon, not a sprint, you have 20 something days of working days a month where you accomplish two high path activities that move a project or a goal forward, and that project's going to make a lot of progress in that time, and you are going to feel a hell of a lot less overwhelmed. And this actually made me think of something from when when we were at Blue Ribbon in Puerto Rico a few months ago. Pilar, I don't know if she talked about
Yeah.
this on
Hmm.
stage or if she talked about this to me individually. I can't remember, but one thing that she mentioned there that actually really changed uh, my overall overwhelm status is I used to pick up my phone when I woke up, and I would look at it as I was going down to get my kids breakfast or have a shower or whatever. And she's like, "Oh, the first like half an hour of your day, if you can just like avoid picking up your device." And I stopped doing it, and it's crazy, man. The the inputs that you get from your device first thing in the morning, whether it's somebody asking you for something, somebody complaining about something, or some random girl dancing on TikTok that you probably shouldn't be looking at when you wake up in the morning. Um, this is like it frames your whole day. It frames your whole day. Like all of those things can be frustrating, um, like in some way or another. And like there's a joke in there, like, and so I stopped doing it. And like now I'll pick up my phone when I'm like heading out the door to go to work or whatever. And like the morning Ryan like has his 30 minutes to have a shower and not think about whatever's about to come my way. And it's unreal how many more positive days or positive starts I've had to days since rolling that out.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I do the same thing. Um, I don't touch my phone the first 15 minutes of the day, and honestly, the first 30 minutes of my day. And the reason why I don't touch my phone the first 30 minutes of the day when I wake up is because I allow myself to mind wander and think about the thoughts that my brain has been wanting to think about.
Yeah.
So when you wake up, your brain's kind of like going through all these different things and wants to process them all. And I just allow, like, I work out, I stretch, I meditate, I do all these different things. And while I'm doing that, I just allow myself to mind wander and see, like, okay, what does my brain want to think about? And I make sure to process those thoughts. So when I go throughout the day, like I'm ready to focus. I'm like all good because I was able to process those thoughts that I wanted to think about. Cool, awesome. Like I'm ready to get going. And being an entrepreneur, you know that there's a million things that need to go on. But if you have that ability to relax and not check your phone, it like makes it where like you have to start thinking about things saying, "Hey, the world is not going to end." Like you can wake up and say, "The world is not going to end if I don't check my phone." Or if I don't check my phone,
Yeah.
and the business is not going to explode by then. I just need to relax. And it makes you start enforcing those thoughts inside your head of relaxing and saying, hey, it's okay not to check your phone. It's okay not to do those things. And it makes those thoughts stronger, which can lead to a lot more like happiness and relaxation as an entrepreneur.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the phone's like it's dopamine, right? My sister's going through. She's taking some. She's going to university to be. I don't know. Like I can't remember if she's going to be psychologist or something like that. And she was telling me in one of her psychology classes right now, they're talking about dopamine layering, which is I hadn't heard the term before, but like you'll go to eat lunch and while you're eating you're looking at your phone, and it's basically like food itself is a source of dopamine, and then you're stacking on another source of dopamine, and like there's only you only have like your neurotransmitters can only process so much that like if you take all your like dopamine shots in the morning, the back end of the day is probably going to lead to things like making poor food choices, or like seeking more dopamine, bigger, stronger dopamine based activities instead of like just being able to take it as it's supposed to be trickled throughout your life. Like we're living in this world where it's never ending. I mean, we all know it. Like it's instant gratification. It's just so much dopamine all the time, and like as soon as you can, I know people talk about dopamine detoxes and everything like that, but if you can just like reduce those a little bit and just like kind of get back to what the
Yeah.
normal wave of what dopamine should be like, I think people just generally be a lot less needy for whatever the next stimulation is.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can't always be in a high no matter where you are. Like life is all about balance, and no matter how high the dopamine goes of all the stimulation, it has to offset it, and you always got to be declining. And what's interesting is most people chase that dopamine increase, that dopamine layering, because of those insecurities is what I've noticed. Because when they're at peak stimulation, that's when insecurities are at their lowest,
Yeah.
when they can actually come in. So people are always chasing that next high, that next thing, whatever that is. And once they get that, their insecurities at their peak lowest. But as soon as that high comes down, those insecure voices start to come in and start telling you're fat, that you're not enough, and everything else. And they're like, oh my gosh, I got to get these voices out of me. Rather than just tackling them and realizing they're there, you realize you don't need to go through all that. Like you always need to chase that next high. It's not necessary because you're comfortable in your own skin and living with where you're at rather than always chasing that next thing. And that makes it where you can actually live in your own core self and actually live with yourself rather than running away from it.
Yeah, man, that makes sense. Yeah, I think it's like a pendulum too, right? Like if you're compensating with dopamine and you're feeling fantastic, when the dopamine runs off, it doesn't just stop back at baseline where you struggle a little bit with the demons. It swings further down into the depths of demon hell. And like you are going to think that the problems are actually considerably worse than like you're probably better off addressing them at baseline than masking them and going into demon hell, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I do want to touch on you talked about like not your body never being enough. And I resonate with that a lot. And I've recently been reading a book called The High Five Habit.
Right.
And basically, what he talks about is every time you look at yourself in the mirror, we usually see everything that we hate about ourselves. Oh, this is too fat. This isn't good enough, whatever this may be. And instead, look at one body part. You're saying, okay, cool. I like that. Like I appreciate that part. I like that part of myself. And then every time you look at yourself in the mirror, it could be once a time a day, just high five your reflection. Like literally, that's it. And so that way you're comfortable with who you are and seeing yourself in the reflection to start that habit of loving yourself. So rather than looking in the mirror, seeing everything you hate, you start to say, okay, I actually do like parts of me. And the ability to really high five yourself in the mirror. And I recently watched a video on TikTok where that this person's definition of happiness was um, to basically always, every time they looked in the mirror, to always look at yourself and smile and be happy with who you are and high five yourself in the mirror. And then that was his definition of happiness. And every time he would be at a point in his life where he did hate himself. He would always talk about it. So that's where I want to start approaching that conversation, is saying, hey, if you hate yourself of who you are, have the conversation with yourself And I know it sounds crazy, like only a crazy person can talk to themselves, but literally, you can have a conversation with your thoughts and say, hey, why do I hate myself? Why am I not comfortable in your own skin? And there will be people that respond. I know it sounds crazy, but there will be people that come back and say, hey, like it's because you're fat, it's because you're not good enough, and all these things. And then you can ask why. Like why do I think that about myself? And you can really start to figure out a lot of different pieces of who you are. It's really amazing.
That's cool. I actually saw a buddy of mine, Kyrie Oliver. He's from Arizona. He's he does some like coaching and stuff like that. But another entrepreneur, and he was actually posting the other day about how like how many hours he sat by himself just looking at in the mirror, and like he would spend an hour a day or something like that for like a considerable amount of time, and just like looking at himself, and not like like goo goo gaga eyes or something, but like who are you, like what are you struggling with, like what do we need to work on, and like just being alone with yourself, and like giving yourself an opportunity to with an open mind so that you can address the I think the state of mind when you go to address things is actually extremely important too. If you're rattled or you're emotionally low and you try to address a problem, you're probably not going to it's probably going to be difficult to get the outcome that you want. Like I think you need to know what your issues are and go into a moment of processing when where you're aware enough to be able to accept the, the conversation that you give back to yourself. You know, like if you're incredibly depressed and in not a good state, diving and sitting in that moment isn't probably going to get you to the outside of it. You know?
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I've really, this is what I found out in myself is I would do an internal dialogue, and the ability to use language to understand how you're feeling is insane. So basically, I would be in states usually about like 2 times or 3 times a week. I would be in a place where I'm feeling my mind is crazy, where I can't process the emotions that I'm having. Like there's so many things going on in my head that my mind just doesn't know how to process the emotions. And literally, I would pull out my phone and just literally talk to myself and saying, okay, I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling upset. And here's maybe why I'm feeling these emotions. And what I'm doing when I do that is I'm justifying and accepting that I have these emotions. And when you start really applying language to the emotions, they become a lot easier to manage because when they're in your head, it's kind of this crazy jumbled mess of spaghetti, is usually how I think
Yeah.
about it. It's like this crazy thing. There's no tangible thing to it. But when you use a word to describe it, like upset, mad, angry, and things like this, it becomes tangible. It's like, okay, I'm mad. Okay, why am I mad? And then you can really start to dive into your brain. So if you're ever in a state where you can't really understand or process your emotions, really using language to describe that and even recording yourself in a camera goes a long way, in my opinion.
I have an interesting question for you. Like, so one thing that I've historically, or I've been more aware of it in like probably like last year, is that like when I feel an emotion, and there's a like there's potential for other people or whatever to be involved in the emotion that I'm feeling. Is that like okay? I'm thinking about how I'm feeling now. I the first thing I try to think of is like what is the root cause of this, and it oftentimes leads to me like since it's now logical me addressing emotional like I've told myself how I feel, and now I'm trying to apply logic to it, which is probably bad, but like why am I feeling this way? And then I'm feeling this way because the way that I was treated by such and such person. And then I'm like, well, why did that person treat me that way? Was there something that I did that caused it? And like I personally have this like this challenge where I'm like trying to determine whether the emotion is the result is actually should I be taking responsibility for that emotion because did I actually cause myself to feel that way indirectly in some capacity by something
Mm,
else that I did? Like, was this the was the way that I was treated the result of something else that I did, or was this just because whatever, like, and I get in this loop where I'm
yeah.
trying to decide whether I can justify, and I'm not trying to assign guilt to something or assign fault to something, but whether I can justify feeling that emotion or even sharing that emotion because it might have been my own fault.
Hmm. And I do that. I do that a lot when a girl rejects me. I will constantly replay it in my mind, saying, "Is it something that I did? Is it something that I messed up on?" And everything else like that. But then I realized that no matter how much I think about it, no matter how much I do, it wouldn't have changed anything about it. And if it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit type of thing. And that's where I also realized that I always try to think about it from their perspective. So I realized that, okay, that girl came up to the conclusion that we're not a good fit. Awesome. I trust her judgment. There are certain things that she saw in me that wasn't a good fit. Like, I trust her judgment. Like, let's go with that. And if she saw that, awesome. Let's roll with that. I'd rather she say that now rather than 7 years in, and then
Yeah.
then she say we're not a good fit.
She, oh
So
yeah, she did you a favor by acknowledging that this isn't going to work before you've actually spent any time.
exactly. And I think I always try to think about it in the other person's perspective and saying, like, rather than seeing it from my perspective, okay, this person did hurt me and did hurt. Like, I first process my emotions saying, okay, this person hurt me on what they said and things like that. Um, and if there's really nothing that I can see that causes that, then from there I just say, okay, like maybe they had context, maybe their father died today, like type of thing, and then they're yelling at me to put that aggression on me type of thing. We lack so much context in other people's lives that
Oh,
there could be
totally.
crazy scenarios that for some reason they just snap, and we think that, oh, I did something to upset this person, but no, their father died and things like that, and now they're angry, and that's the reason. So I always think about it from their perspective on any crazy things that might be happening in their lives, and that helps me process certain situations that I really have no control over.
Yeah, I actually had a scenario like 20 years ago, maybe not quite 20, but close to that. I was actually pretty close to where I am right now, and it's like a one-way road. And I was driving back, probably a little over the speed limit, and there was this car behind me, and they were like honking at me nonstop, like nonstop,
Hmm.
like. And I was like, God, I put my hands up in the air, like I was pissed off, right, like on this road. And then they're like, my dog has to get to the emergency. My dog got hurt, or I can't remember exactly what it was. And then I'm like, oh man, I feel horrible, right? Like I was like, I obviously didn't have anything to do with the dog being hurt, but like exactly what you just said. You have no idea what somebody else is going through, and like, you know, that person was trying to just make sure that their dog lived. They weren't honking at me because they thought I was a dick. They were honking at me because they wanted me to pull over so they could get their dog help. And there's 7 billion 900 and whatever million people on this planet that are all autonomous doing their own thing. And yeah, man, somebody might be somebody might be shitty to you, but it's you get to determine. You're responsible for how you respond to their behavior and how you let it affect you. And if you have that mindset that you just shared, like, I think it's a lot easier to be like, oh, he's having a bad day. Maybe, yeah, something bad happened, and I'll forgive him.
And I go even a step further than that. So when someone hurts me and when someone hurts me and says something like horrible to me, I take a step back and saying, "Hey, that would have been me if my dad didn't love me. That would have been me if my mother didn't love me." And that's how far context wise I go on why someone like may hurt me and things like that. And I always apply context to them, and that's like a huge thing for me. And how I approach it when it comes to dealing with people.
That's smart, man.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that's all we have time for today because I know we can go on for this for 7 more hours. I guarantee it. It's been a super high energy conversation. Ryan, please tell them how to find you if they have any questions and find more about your business.
Yeah, for the business, you can visit tru.earth, not .com, EARTH, or you can find me on, I've got a YouTube channel. I don't talk about this kind of stuff that much, but I mostly talk about e-commerce. You can find me on Twitter too. I think it's RYE Mckenzie, McKenzie.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ryan, for joining. This is an awesome conversation. And thank you, everyone, for watching. Catch you next time.